Victor Hugo, a towering figure of 19th-century literature, wrote Les Misérables not merely as a novel, but as a monumental reflection of society. Published in 1862, the work was conceived during a time of political upheaval and social inequality in France. Hugo's purpose was ambitious, to expose the wounds of a society fractured by poverty, injustice, and moral rigidity. His profound empathy for the oppressed fueled this magnum opus, which he regarded as both a literary masterpiece and a call to action. At its core, Les Misérables explores universal themes of humanity: the struggle for redemption, the transformative power of love, and the enduring battle against social injustice. Hugo portrays individuals as products of their circumstances, yet capable of transcending them through courage and compassion. The novel delves into the moral dilemmas faced by its characters, illustrating the tension between strict law and merciful justice. Ultimately, it is a story of hope and redemption, suggesting that even in the darkest times, the light of human goodness can prevail. Hugo divided Les Misérables into 5 distinct parts, each weaving together the personal and the historical. The novel's structure mirrors a symphony, with recurring themes and motifs that echo throughout. The first part introduces Jean Valjean's moral transformation, setting the stage for the lives he touches. Subsequent sections delve into the suffering of the impoverished, the promise of love, and the turbulence of revolutionary Paris. These threads converge in the final part, where tragedy and redemption intertwine, leaving readers with a profound sense of humanity's potential for greatness. By intertwining the struggles of individuals like Jean Valjean, Fantine, and Cosette with the broader social upheavals of 19th-century France, Hugo crafts a tale that is both deeply personal and universally resonant. In the sections that follow, we will journey through this epic, chapter by chapter, unraveling its intricate narrative while uncovering its timeless lessons. Jean Valjean's story begins in the depths of despair. Born into poverty, Valjean shoulders the burden of supporting his sister and her starving children. Driven by desperation, he steals a loaf of bread, a single act that will haunt him for decades. Captured and sentenced to 5 years of hard labor, Valjean discovers that the wheels of justice turn without compassion. His repeated escape attempts lengthen his sentence to 19 years, and by the time he is released, he is no longer merely a poor man, but a hardened and embittered soul. Hugo vividly describes Valjean's transformation during his imprisonment. Once a simple, kind-hearted laborer, he becomes a man filled with anger and distrust. Society brands him a criminal, reducing his humanity to a yellow passport marking him as a pariah. Valjean's return to freedom is marked not by liberation, but by rejection. Everywhere he goes, he is met with suspicion and hostility. The system that punished him has ensured he remains trapped in the shadows, unable to reintegrate into society. Amid this bleak existence, a pivotal encounter changes everything. Valjean arrives in the small town of Digne, where he is reluctantly taken in by Bishop Myriel, a kind and generous man who offers him food and shelter. That night, Valjean, overwhelmed by his bitterness, succumbs to his old ways and steals the bishop's silverware. When he is caught and brought back by the authorities, Bishop Myriel performs an act of extraordinary grace. He not only claims he gave the silver to Valjean, but also adds 2 candlesticks, instructing Valjean to use them to build an honest life. This moment is the turning point of Valjean's existence. Hugo paints the scene with a luminous intensity, describing the bishop's words as a divine command that pierces Valjean's hardened heart. The sheer power of this forgiveness forces Valjean to confront his own conscience. For the first time in years, he begins to see the possibility of redemption. The candlesticks, which will remain with him for the rest of his life, symbolize a moral and spiritual light that guides him forward. Valjean, now resolved to transform his life, sheds his old identity. Under the alias Monsieur Madeleine, he builds a prosperous factory and rises to become the mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer. His newfound wealth allows him to help others, offering jobs to the poor and supporting the community. His generosity and leadership earn him the admiration of the town, but his past remains a shadow that threatens to resurface. Hugo portrays this chapter of Valjean's life as one of triumph and inner struggle. While Valjean outwardly thrives, his heart remains burdened by guilt and fear. The memory of the bishop's forgiveness compels him to act with kindness, but he knows his new life is built on a lie. This tension between his desire for redemption and the fear of being unmasked fuels the drama of the narrative. Through Valjean's journey, Hugo explores the possibility of redemption. He argues that no person is irredeemable, and that even the most broken lives can be mended through love and forgiveness. However, redemption requires not only external grace, but also an inner commitment to change, as Valjean demonstrates by dedicating his life to helping others. Fantine, a young and beautiful woman from Montreuil-sur-Mer, begins her story with a glimmer of hope and love. She falls for a man named Tholomyès, a wealthy student who promises her the world. Their romance is brief and ends cruelly when Tholomyès abandons her, leaving her alone and pregnant with their child, Cosette. Fantine, cast adrift, resolves to raise her daughter with dignity despite the stigma of unwed motherhood. Unable to care for Cosette while seeking work, Fantine entrusts her to the Thénardiers, an innkeeper couple in the village of Montfermeil. The Thénardiers initially appear kind and agreeable, assuring Fantine that they will treat Cosette as their own child. However, they quickly reveal their true nature. They exploit Fantine's love for her daughter by demanding increasing sums of money for Cosette's care, while subjecting the little girl to constant abuse and neglect. Fantine's life spirals downward as she struggles to meet the Thénardiers' demands. She finds work in one of the factories owned by the prosperous mayor, Monsieur Madeleine, who is, in truth, the reformed Jean Valjean. Initially, she manages to conceal her status as an unwed mother, but her secret is eventually exposed. Her co-workers, motivated by malice, inform the foreman, who summarily dismisses her. Now jobless and without means, Fantine is plunged into destitution. Desperation drives Fantine to sell everything she has, first her hair, then her teeth, and finally her body. She becomes a prostitute, enduring humiliation and abuse to send money to the Thénardiers, who continue to fabricate lies about Cosette's needs. Fantine's health deteriorates rapidly under the weight of her suffering, but she clings to the hope that her sacrifices will secure a better life for her daughter. One fateful day, Fantine is harassed by a wealthy dandy in the street. When she defends herself, she is arrested by Inspector Javert, the strict and unyielding local police officer. Javert sees only a lawbreaker in Fantine and intends to send her to prison. However, Monsieur Madeleine intervenes. Learning of Fantine's plight, he orders her release and takes her under his protection, much to Javert's astonishment and disapproval. Fantine, consumed by shame and bitterness, initially blames Madeleine for her misery, believing him complicit in her dismissal from the factory. Yet as he cares for her and promises to reunite her with Cosette, her hostility softens into gratitude and trust. Sadly, Fantine's health continues to decline, and she grows weaker by the day. Madeleine's kindness to Fantine is not without its challenges. During this time, Javert comes forward with a startling revelation. A man named Champmathieu has been arrested and falsely identified as the fugitive Jean Valjean. Javert, unaware of Madeleine's true identity, demands his approval to pursue the case further. Madeleine is faced with an agonizing choice: remain silent to protect his new life, or reveal himself to save an innocent man. In the end, Valjean's conscience triumphs. He attends Champmathieu's trial and publicly confesses his true identity. The courtroom is thrown into chaos, and Valjean is arrested. However, before surrendering himself to the law, he ensures that Fantine is cared for. He rushes back to her bedside to fulfill his promise of reuniting her with Cosette. Tragically, Fantine dies before seeing her daughter, her final moments marked by the cruel reality of a society that has stripped her of everything. Javert emerges as a symbol of uncompromising law in this section of the story. His rigid belief in authority and order leaves no room for compassion or understanding. For Javert, justice is absolute, and Valjean's past crimes define him forever. This unwavering conviction drives his relentless pursuit of Valjean after the latter's confession. The tension between Javert and Valjean is not merely a personal struggle, but a clash of ideologies. Valjean represents the possibility of redemption, proving that individuals can rise above their past through love and self-sacrifice. Javert, on the other hand, embodies a system that views humanity in black and white, failing to recognize the shades of gray that define real lives. Fantine becomes a casualty of this conflict. Her suffering is a direct result of a society that values appearances over compassion and punishes those who do not conform. Javert's treatment of her highlights the dehumanizing nature of a system that prioritizes rules over mercy. Fantine's tragic story is a heart-wrenching testament to the cruelty of a society that marginalizes its most vulnerable members. Her relentless love for Cosette stands in stark contrast to the indifference of those around her. Through Fantine's suffering, Hugo exposes the harsh realities faced by women and the poor, painting an unflinching portrait of a world in desperate need of reform. Cosette, the daughter of the ill-fated Fantine, spends her early years in the abusive care of the Thénardier, innkeepers in the village of Montfermeil. While her mother sacrifices everything to send money for her upkeep, the Thénardiers squander it on themselves, treating Cosette as little more than a servant. She is tasked with endless chores and denied the affection and care given to the Thénardiers' own daughters, Éponine and Azelma. Hugo vividly depicts Cosette's suffering. She fetches water alone in the dark, carries burdens far too heavy for her small frame, and endures constant scolding and humiliation. Her spirit, once lively, is dimmed by the unrelenting cruelty of her environment. The villagers refer to her mockingly as the Lark, because she is always seen working silently at dawn. Despite her hardships, Cosette clings to faint memories of her mother's love, which sustain her in moments of despair. Her longing for kindness and safety becomes a silent plea that echoes through her difficult existence, waiting to be answered. After revealing his true identity to save an innocent man, Jean Valjean escapes imprisonment and goes into hiding. Though pursued relentlessly by Inspector Javert, he resolves to fulfill his promise to Fantine, to rescue Cosette and care for her as his own. Disguised and cautious, Valjean tracks the girl to Montfermeil, where he witnesses the extent of her suffering under the Thénardier. One cold December night, Valjean finds Cosette struggling to carry a heavy bucket of water from a distant well. Her small figure, silhouetted against the darkness, moves him deeply. Offering her help, he gently takes the bucket and accompanies her back to the inn. For the first time in years, Cosette experiences an act of kindness, though she hardly dares to believe in it. Valjean enters the Thénardiers' inn and observes their abusive treatment of Cosette firsthand. The Thénardiers, initially wary of the stranger, are easily swayed by Valjean's display of wealth. He offers them 1,500 francs to take Cosette away, a sum they cannot refuse. The transaction completed, Valjean departs with Cosette, walking hand in hand into the night. This moment marks a profound shift in Cosette's life. Though frightened and unsure, she instinctively feels safe with Valjean. As they journey together, she begins to trust him, and a bond starts to form between the man who has vowed to protect her and the child who has known only suffering. Valjean and Cosette settle in Paris, where they live under assumed names to avoid detection by Javert. In their modest home, Valjean devotes himself entirely to Cosette's well-being, determined to provide her with the love and security she has never known. Cosette, in turn, blossoms under his care. Her once fearful and withdrawn demeanor gives way to the natural cheerfulness of a child. Hugo describes their life together with tender intimacy, emphasizing the small, everyday moments that build their relationship. Valjean teaches Cosette to read and write, listens to her childish musings, and watches with quiet joy as she grows into a kind and graceful young woman. Cosette comes to see Valjean not only as her rescuer, but as a father figure, and her affection for him becomes the centerpiece of her life. Despite their happiness, Valjean remains vigilant. He is haunted by the fear of losing Cosette, and constantly watches for signs of Javert's pursuit. His love for Cosette, however, gives him a sense of purpose that he has never known before. She becomes the light in his life, a living symbol of redemption and hope. In this section, the relationship between Valjean and Cosette takes center stage. Their bond is built on love and mutual need. Valjean seeks redemption through caring for Cosette, while she finds in him the protection and affection she has always longed for. Together, they create a sanctuary from the harsh realities of the world, a place where love and hope can flourish. Cosette's transformation from a mistreated servant to a cherished daughter highlights the healing power of love. Through Valjean's devotion, she regains her sense of self-worth and learns to trust again. Similarly, Valjean's life is enriched by Cosette's presence as she gives him a purpose that transcends his past. This chapter of their story also sows the seeds of hope for the future. Cosette's growth and happiness symbolize the possibility of a better world, one where kindness and love triumph over cruelty and despair. As the story progresses, the bond between Valjean and Cosette will be tested, but their love remains a guiding force in the face of adversity. Marius Pontmercy is introduced as a young law student living in Paris. His story begins with a family torn apart by political loyalties. Raised by his staunchly royalist grandfather, Monsieur Gillenormand, Marius grows up in a household steeped in conservative values. However, his late father, Colonel Georges Pontmercy, was a loyal supporter of Napoleon and fought bravely for his cause. Marius's understanding of his father is shaped by Gillenormand's disdain, as the old man forbids any mention of Colonel Pontmercy. When Marius discovers the truth about his father's legacy through a chance encounter with a fellow veteran, it marks a turning point in his life. He becomes deeply moved by his father's sacrifices and adopts a new perspective on justice and politics. He rejects the royalist ideals of his upbringing and embraces the revolutionary principles his father championed. Estranged from his grandfather, Marius lives in poverty, renting a small room in a dilapidated building. Despite his financial struggles, he remains steadfast in his ideals and immerses himself in the intellectual and political debates of the time. His friendships with a group of revolutionary students, collectively known as the Friends of the ABC, further solidify his commitment to social change. These young men, led by the charismatic Enjolras, dream of a more just and equitable France, even as their dreams lead them toward the storm of revolution. The story shifts to the turbulent political landscape of 1832, a time when France is rife with unrest. The death of General Lamarck, a champion of the people and a symbol of hope for the downtrodden, serves as the spark that ignites the July Rebellion. The Friends of the ABC seize the moment, rallying the people to rise against the oppressive monarchy. The students construct barricades in the streets of Paris, determined to fight for their vision of liberty. Hugo describes the barricade as both a physical structure and a symbol of resistance, built from overturned carts, barrels, and debris. It becomes a space where courage and sacrifice converge, where idealism meets the brutal reality of war. Marius, though initially hesitant, joins his friends at the barricade, driven by a sense of duty and camaraderie. The battle is fierce and chaotic, with the revolutionaries facing overwhelming odds. Enjolras emerges as a fearless leader, inspiring his comrades with his unwavering conviction, while Gavroche, the street-smart child of Paris, demonstrates extraordinary bravery despite his tender age. As the fighting intensifies, Marius distinguishes himself with a heroic act. When the barricade is nearly breached, he threatens to detonate a barrel of gunpowder, forcing the attackers to retreat. His selflessness earns him the admiration of his comrades, but the victory is short-lived. The revolutionaries are gradually overpowered, and the barricade becomes a place of tragic sacrifice. Amid the backdrop of revolution, a tender love story unfolds. Marius first notices Cosette during one of her walks with Jean Valjean in the Luxembourg Gardens. Her beauty and grace captivate him, and he becomes infatuated. Unbeknownst to Marius, Cosette, now a young woman, is equally drawn to him. Their glances and unspoken connection awaken feelings they have never experienced before. Marius learns of Cosette's address with the help of Éponine, the Thénardier's eldest daughter, who secretly harbors unrequited love for him. Éponine's love for Marius drives her to help him, even at great personal cost. Through her efforts, Marius and Cosette are finally brought together, and their mutual affection blossoms into a deep and passionate love. Their romance is marked by moments of stolen intimacy, filled with whispered promises and dreams of a future together. However, their happiness is overshadowed by the looming threat of revolution and the ever-watchful presence of Jean Valjean, who remains deeply protective of Cosette. Valjean's suspicions about Marius's intentions create tension as he fears losing the only family he has left. As the barricade becomes the focal point of the narrative, Marius is torn between his love for Cosette and his commitment to the cause. He leaves her a farewell letter, entrusting it to Éponine, who sacrifices her own desires to ensure Cosette receives it. Éponine, driven by her love for Marius, joins the barricade and ultimately sacrifices her life to save him, dying in his arms with a smile, content to have been close to him in her final moments. The story reaches its moral and emotional climax as the lives of Jean Valjean, Cosette, Marius, and Javert intertwine once more. Javert, the dogged inspector who has spent decades pursuing Valjean, finds himself in a crisis of conscience. His rigid worldview, built on the belief that the law is absolute, begins to crumble when confronted with Valjean's actions. During the chaos at the barricades, Javert infiltrates the revolutionaries as a spy, but is discovered and captured. The students, led by Enjolras, sentence him to death for treachery. However, Valjean, now at the barricades to protect Marius for Cosette's sake, intervenes. He requests to execute Javert himself, but instead frees him, letting him go unharmed. This act of mercy deeply unsettles Javert. He is unable to reconcile Valjean's kindness with his belief that criminals are irredeemable. As Valjean carries an unconscious and gravely injured Marius through the Paris sewers, Javert waits for him at the exit. When Valjean emerges, exhausted but triumphant, Javert allows him to leave with Marius. Javert's internal conflict reaches a breaking point. For the first time, he questions the infallibility of the law and his role as its enforcer. The man he has hunted for so long has shown him an unexpected humanity, challenging the principles that have defined his life. Unable to resolve this contradiction, Javert takes his own life by plunging into the Seine, ending his journey in despair and confusion. Valjean brings Marius back to safety, ensuring that he receives the care needed to recover from his injuries. Despite his physical and emotional exhaustion, Valjean fulfills his promise to Cosette by preserving the life of the man she loves. As Marius regains his strength, his love for Cosette deepens, and the two plan to marry. However, Valjean's past casts a shadow over his happiness. He fears that his criminal record will endanger Cosette's future and tarnish her new life with Marius. When Marius, unaware of Valjean's sacrifices, learns of his identity, he begins to distance himself from Valjean. Though Cosette is heartbroken, Valjean encourages her to embrace her new life and refrains from revealing the truth about his deeds. Alone and in declining health, Valjean retreats to a small, sparsely furnished room. He faces his final days with quiet dignity, reflecting on the choices he has made and the love he has given. Though he has been cast aside by society, and even those he holds most dear, he finds solace in the knowledge that he has fulfilled his promise to Fantine and provided Cosette with a brighter future. In his last moments, Valjean is reunited with Cosette and Marius. Marius, having learned of Valjean's heroic actions at the barricade and the sacrifices he made for their happiness, begs for forgiveness. Valjean's joy at seeing Cosette one final time is evident, and he passes away in peace, comforted by their presence. The novel concludes with a poignant blend of sorrow and hope. Valjean's death is a moment of profound loss, yet it is also a testament to the transformative power of love and redemption. His life, marked by hardship and sacrifice, has left an indelible impact on those he loved. Marius and Cosette, now married, honor Valjean's memory by ensuring that his legacy is not forgotten. Though they mourn his passing, their love and devotion to each other reflect the enduring influence of his kindness and courage. Cosette, who once knew only suffering, embodies the hope that Valjean fought to preserve. The novel's closing image is that of Valjean's grave, a simple and unmarked resting place that mirrors the humility of his life. Yet, within this quiet ending lies a powerful message. Even in the face of tragedy, love and sacrifice have the power to illuminate the darkest corners of the human experience. Victor Hugo's Les Misérables endures as a timeless masterpiece, calling for compassion, understanding, and the recognition of our shared humanity. Through its vivid portrayal of love, sacrifice, and redemption, the novel transcends its 19th century setting to address universal themes that remain relevant today. Hugo's exploration of social injustice, the struggles of the marginalized, and the triumph of love and hope over despair urges readers to reflect on the human condition. It is a powerful reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, kindness and selflessness have the power to transform lives and inspire change. With its rich characters and profound moral vision, Les Misérables continues to resonate with readers, encouraging empathy and the pursuit of a more just and compassionate world.